Hello, hello! This is Tyson Farmer from TysonFarmer.com, and today I've got a fun video for you about how I created my own custom-designed picking hand camera. I think you're going to like this mad scientist creation of mine, and I had a lot of fun making it. I'm not sure if I'm the first one to ever invent such a thing, but so far I haven't seen any sign of it online yet, much less a making of video. Either way, I'm putting it out there to show it off and hopefully inspire you to copy or improve on it. So as an online guitar teacher, I've found that several different camera angles really help for showing close-ups of my hand position during lessons, like a general front view, an overhead view of my fretting hand, and a side view of my strumming and picking hand. However, one camera angle I always wished I had was a view looking out from inside my guitar for detailed picking hand techniques like pick position, advanced pick techniques, and especially finger picking. That's what eventually inspired this project, and what really inspires pretty much all my best creations, a strong need for something useful to make my life easier. In other words, necessity is the mother of invention. By the way, I call this my picking hand in the context of stringed instrument playing, instead of just calling it my right hand, because sometimes I teach left-handed players and things get confusing when I say left and right. So I just got into the habit of naming my hands in my music lessons by what they do on the guitar. So this is my picking hand, and this is my fretting hand. I had this old Alvarez acoustic guitar just sitting around and collecting dust that had a huge crack in one of the corners from a fall decades ago, but I just hadn't had the heart to get rid of it yet, so I decided to make it my project guitar. That way, if the whole thing went sideways, it was a guitar that was going to be retired anyway. First off, I had to repair all those cracks, since over the years it had gotten pretty bad from my long shirt sleeves catching on the wood fibers and pulling tiny bits of them away little by little over the years. The top had also gradually worked its way off the binding from the sides, which was more than just cosmetic, but part of the guitar's infrastructure. I had really put off studying in how to fix all this for a long time and just live with it, because I just kind of assumed that it was some secret Masonic luthier trick that you needed special tools and materials for, and advanced training and experience to do right. I honestly had no idea about how freaking simple a fix it was to just wood glue the dang thing back together. But I faced my fears and finally got around to doing a little search on YouTube and found out it really is just glooping a bunch of wood glue in and making sure it saturates into the wood enough, clamping it down, letting it dry, and then just sanding it all down for smoothness. My arms were just too big and the angle was just wrong enough for me to not be able to reach all the way inside my guitar. So I enlisted the help of my mom, who has smaller arms and is pretty handy with repairing and finishing furniture and antiques, and thus not afraid to get her hands a little dirty for a good project like this. She had some trouble feeling what she was doing while manipulating that big glue bottle inside the guitar body, so she just ended up pouring a bunch of wood glue into her cupped hand, reached on in, and smeared it on liberally by hand. Most unfortunately, I do not have any footage of all this since I was helping hold the guitar at the time, but that was actually my favorite part of this project, watching her just dig right in and get it done. I borrowed a wood clamp from my dad, clamped it all down, and let it dry a few days. I had bought some professional grade cyanoacrylate online, which is basically just a fancy way of saying a big bottle of expensive superglue. And following some YouTube tutorials, I used it to fill in some of the smaller hairline cracks and keep them from getting worse. These dried quickly, so I was ready for the next phase fairly soon. I had already ordered all the parts I needed online and beta tested them out, so I knew they worked outside the guitar. I had a USB cable that went from the computer to a USB splitter on the other side that split off to a small ring light for illuminating from behind the camera and an old retired webcam that I had modified to make the wire come out of the bottom instead of the back. The tricky part was going to be creating a USB jack on the side of my guitar. This not only meant I had to custom design a jack I could plug a USB cable into, but of course I had to drill a hole into the side of my guitar, which naturally made me a little nervous. I had already beta tested the whole affair outside the guitar, so I knew it worked the way I had pictured it, but getting everything together inside the guitar was the tricky part. Browsing around at Home Depot provided the solution: a keystone jack. Keystone jacks are customizable wall plates that you can snap different receptacles into to custom design your own wall plate, like a wall plate with Ethernet and USB, or RCA and coax receptacles. I knew that would work well for my needs, but also knew that nothing like this existed for a guitar mount, so I knew I had to make one myself. I have a 3D printer and I love designing new things on it, so I set to work creating a keystone jack mount. I experimentally designed and 3D printed several basic parts as experiments until I realized that somebody had probably already done this before me, and I could save myself a lot of trouble by just downloading it. So I went on Thingiverse.com, looked around, and sure enough, found one within a few minutes. I integrated it into my 3D design program, rotated it to the right position, and added a circular plate onto it. Several prints later to get the centering just right, and I had my mount. Most keystone jacks that you can get at big box home improvement stores are some variation of white, but I wanted a more professional and sleek black look, so I had to order a few from online. I snapped it in, and it fitted in perfectly. Now for the part that made me nervous: drilling the hole. I wanted this to be a snug fit to just allow for the keystone jack I had made, so I measured the longest length of the rectangular part of the jack at 1¼ inches, went to Home Depot and bought a hole drill of that size. It seemed like it would be a little bit of a tight fit, but that's what I wanted, since I could just patiently sand out the hole little by little until it fit in snugly. I already knew that anytime you're drilling through wood, it's always a good idea to put down masking tape and drill through that to prevent any splinters or burrs. This was especially important for such a thin piece of wood as the body of an acoustic guitar, but unfortunately I couldn't reach inside the body to apply it from that side, and my mom wasn't around to help this time, so I had to settle for taping just the outside. From looking inside the guitar, I knew I had to be careful about the placement since I didn't want to drill into any bracing that would affect the structural integrity of the guitar. So I carefully measured and added a little onto my measurement to be sure. I applied the tape and gritted my teeth through the moment of truth. I was committed at this point, no going back now. It was actually over with pretty quickly. I checked inside and breathed a sigh of relief. I had done the math just right and had just missed cutting into the bracing. That was actually the hardest part. From here, everything else kind of fell into place. I mounted the ring light onto the back of the guitar with double-sided sticky tape, and mounted the webcam onto the ring light with more tape, plugged them both into the USB splitter, plugged the USB splitter into the keystone jack, and plugged a USB cable from my computer into the other side of the keystone jack, and I saw my first view from inside my guitar. The ring light had a little set of controls, so I had to mount that where I could reach it from outside for turning it on and off in between different light settings. Double-sided tape to the rescue once again. Now I could reach inside my guitar anytime I needed it to access the settings, but they were out of sight from a front view. I hadn't wanted to permanently mount any custom keystone jack onto the guitar until after I was sure everything worked, so I needed to tie up this loose end next. Before I did this, however, I had to deal with the curvature of the guitar where I had drilled the hole. My custom keystone jack was perfectly straight, but the body of my guitar had the usual curvature to it. Luckily, standard ABS 3D printing filament is slightly malleable when you heat it enough. It has to be for effective 3D printing to happen in the first place. So I just used a hairdryer to get it to the point where I could bend it just enough to conform to the curvature of my guitar. I got some extra strength double-sided sticky tape from Home Depot and cut this to fit the keystone jack. I wanted to do this instead of gluing it permanently, since I wanted to give myself some non-destructive options in case I needed to get in there again someday for maintenance and repair. The guy at Home Depot told me this tape was pretty strong, but I knew I could get it to release with a hot air gun if needed. A little less drastic than permanent glue, but still strong enough to be kind of a hassle to undo if the need came up. So, cut to fit, carefully align, and press. And there it was, in all its glory, my fully custom designed picking hand camera. I was using it by my next online lesson, and it was already making my teaching life so much easier. However, it turns out that it was a wise idea to tape the USB jack onto my guitar non-permanently, since the webcam I used turned out to be, well,
a decrepit piece of crap.
It kept freezing mid-lesson every time I made the tiniest movement, and I had to close and reset my OBS video switcher anytime I wanted to get it to webcam again. For what it's worth, although it's a decent deal financially, I can't confidently recommend this webcam for anything other than fixed webcam work, where it does never move on a non-mobile desktop environment. I did some shopping around and found this Angetube webcam that had a ring light already built in. This made the whole affair much easier since I could get rid of that extra cable splitter and just use the one USB cable extender for everything. I simply taped the new camera on the back of the guitar in the old one's place, plugged it into the USB cable extender inside the guitar, experimented until I got the right angle, and I was all set. I've been using this camera in my teaching setup for months now, and it's a solid little camera that holds up to me picking the guitar up and down many times daily. Not only that, the ring camera light turns on and off and adjusts its brightness by touch. So I only need to reach into my guitar, touch the ring light, and it's on and ready to go. In fact, I liked it so much that I ended up eventually replacing all my old teaching webcams with the same model once they were due for upgrades. For what it's worth, I'm not affiliated with this company or this camera in any way, so I'm not trying to sell you on it. I just like it. It's a solid little camera and it's done me some good. Now, there are some downsides to this setup that I wanted to mention in the interest of full disclosure. First, I have to be super careful and slow about how I cradle my guitar onto its stand, since the USB cable is sort of just poking out there and can hit on stuff if I'm not careful. In fact, more recently, I had to actually reprint the whole keystone jack and refasten the whole thing together, since I cradled my guitar in a hurry one time in a lesson and the cable jack grinded against the floor, cracking the whole assembly. Next, the cable itself gradually gets twisted over time as I cradle my guitar onto the stand and take it off again over and over during my lessons. I can't just unplug and unwind it mid-lesson and plug it back in, since that instantly freezes my video feed and I have to reset my OBS video switching software anytime I need to do that. So I've just gotten into the habit of unwinding the cable before I start my video software before a day of lessons. Another step I have to do before starting lessons is to refocus the camera back on the string, since it resets the default focus every time I turn my video software off. And finally, the light is kind of distracting if I point it right at my front lesson camera, and I feel like the student seeing the view of my monitors is kind of dumb and breaks a fourth wall, so to speak, if they see all my editing software and their own face mid-lesson, not to mention the horrible mess on my teaching desk I have from time to time. Sometimes. So I've gotten into the habit of pointing the camera away from the monitors if I can when using it. However, none of these factors are even close to deal breakers for me and just feel more like standard maintenance rules and setup chores more than downsides. So there it is, my custom designed picking hand camera. What do you think? Drop me a comment below with your thoughts, whether it's to give me love or even constructive criticism. I use this tool so much that it's become an important part of my teaching setup, to the point that I can't teach online quite as successfully or smoothly without it. And my students love it too. It eliminates loads of wordy and awkward explanations by just showing picking hand concepts visually. And if you can believe it, some of my students will even complain about not having this view whenever I'm out of town and teaching on my mobile setup. I hope this video helped you with some outside-the-box ideas, and I hope it inspires some of you teachers out there to use it in your online teaching toolbox. I see this as another online teaching tool whose time has come, and I can't wait to see how others improve on my concepts to evolve it to the next level. Links are below to all the resources and products I used in this project. This is Tyson Farmer from TysonFarmer.com. Check out my online teaching profile using my link in the comments below, and stay motivated and keep playing.